2024 National in Cleveland, Ohio. Are you guys going? Well, I'm going. And are you going to, I know that you're going to be selling something. So I can't wait to see what you'll be selling at the show, what we might be buying from you. But would you like some tips, some tricks? Hear our point of view from the dealer side. Can't wait to share with you all the questions that we got. Myself, Joe, and Tim, who work in the shop, are going to be giving you their perspective, as well as guys that just help in the store and have done the National many times. So I can't wait to show you all these tips, all these tricks, and we'll have a good time talking through the fun part of making some bang, making some cheddar, making some scratch at the National.
My name is Joe. I've worked at the shop for almost 2 years now, going on 2 years. Last National was my first one. I had a super fun time. It was super busy. I was mostly buying for the shop at the National. So I got to walk around a little bit, but it was super busy. I've collected cards pretty much my whole life. So seeing a ton of cards is nothing new, but it's always cool to see like how many cards are really at the National. You don't expect it if you've never been there, and I had no idea. I would say my favorite memory of the National was going to all the different trade nights and really seeing, like, you know, it's one thing when you're at the show and seeing how many people are there, but to see how many people really love like a certain type of card, like F1, we went to the F1 trade night and I know nothing about F1, but it was cool to just see all the different types of cards and high-end cards that are there. I had a good time just even after the show, just hanging out in the hotel room, buying cards from people and selling them in my case that I got.
My name is Tim, and I have worked at the shop for nearly 3 years now. This will be my fifth National. My first one was when I was a little kid, in the one in Atlanta, actually. We actually drove to it. Collected cards pretty much all of my childhood. Me and my father collected from, I would say, 1986 through 1992-ish, somewhere in there. And then I picked back up collecting end of 2016, I guess it was, until now. Some of the advice to somebody that's trying to sell their cards at the National, the most important one is just have your cards priced. There's an old joke that the dealer's job isn't to buy and sell your own cards. So, you know, have an idea what you want, have a price. If it's something that's tough to comp, obviously there's things that are that tough. But for the most part, at least have a pretty good idea.
Another piece of advice, if you're going to sell some cards or if you're waiting in line for something, if I'm waiting in line for, say, a certain buyer and I see 2-3 people walk away not looking super happy and they didn't walk away with a deal, I'm thinking to myself, all right, how long am I going to be waiting in this line? Am I going to get a deal done? A lot of times there's a huge chance that people paying strong, everybody's just selling to them because people know. And for me as a seller, when I'm walking my cards around at shows, I'm gonna say, all right, I wanna go to the people that are paying the strongest and are really fast to deal with so then I can move on to the next thing. If you waste 3 hours of your time in one deal, that's a lot of time to waste at the National, and it's expensive too. Tickets are expensive and you wanna make the most of your visit. Another piece of advice that I have for selling your cards is where you're getting your comps from. So I can find sales on some of my cards that are crazy expensive and crazy cheap, but I think that most dealers are typically sticking to eBay, Card Ladder, and 130 Point. Those are always pretty solid at just getting data. Stuff like collector, price charting, sometimes even alt, they don't aggregate the data correctly, and for niche cards, sometimes the values that they spit out just aren't as accurate. So I'd say when you're comping your cards, when you're trying to sell your cards, go off stuff that has real comps and that has real values that a dealer can see and say, all right, well, I can pay this based off that. I think that's the easiest way to sell cards. A lot of big buyers like repackers are typically just going off the last few sales on eBay and then making their offer on that. So if you think that your card is worth, say, $100 because you scanned it and that's what some app says, it's not always the case and that's not what people are gonna pay. Repackers pay really strong, but they're really firm with their prices. And if you're looking to sell to people that pay the highest, I would recommend just getting a solid comp that you're comfortable with and going with that.
So there's a lot of advice that I would give to people when it comes to buying and selling. One thing from the selling side, and you are walking up to a booth to sell your prized possessions and your stuff that you've bought and you want to flip and all that, is remember a couple things. One, just be confident in it. I think one thing for me as a dealer, I hate seeing people who are unsure of if they want to sell an item, if they want to let go of something. I know we can always talk about pricing. I'm sure the guys and us are going to always harp back to know your comps and these kinds of things, but just be confident in that. And then also, don't sell something that you would regret. I think that you're at the National, so you could probably find anything in the, under the sun, right? This is the biggest show on earth. But don't sell something you'd regret. I think that's going to really go back to bite you. And I know it could bother you later on the show, and you don't want that. So bring the things that you want to sell, keep the things that you don't want to sell.
Some advice that I would give for people trying to sell their cards at the National, first of all, I would say know your comps. I would roughly know what cards are worth. It makes it so much faster for dealers that are trying to purchase cards, or your buddy that wants to buy something off you, a guy that you just met. If you know roughly what stuff is worth, it makes it so much easier to sell stuff from your end and theirs. So that way you know, am I getting a good deal, or is somebody trying to kill me on pricing?
The most important tip for making it enjoyable is wear comfortable shoes. But then for making it enjoyable for everyone else, I always tell people to, in their backpack, so they carry their cards, carry some deodorant, carry some gum, spare t-shirt if you need it. I know I missed last year, and from what I understand, it was a sauna in Chicago, so a spare t-shirt also isn't a bad idea. But just comfortable shoes is the most important. You're going to be walking a ton. You think you're going to walk a lot, but you walk even more.
I would say don't stress about it. Don't worry, oh, did I sell that too low, or did I buy this card way too high? I would say as long as you don't feel stressed, it's probably fine. In the end, I've sold cards too cheap before, and I've bought cards way too expensive before. It's all a learning thing. I would say at the end of the day, if you're happy and you had a good time, that's all that matters. I wouldn't worry too much about little deals. I would just get a deal done fast and then move on to the next thing, because you're really missing out. You only have a limited time window. You want to make the most of it. And I would say that's the best way to do it, is just don't stress. Go through it, work fast. Obviously don't sell $1,000 cards for $100, but it'll all work out in the end.
You're at the National, so you want it to be enjoyable. You don't want this experience to be something you regret or something that you don't want to think about. One element that I know that I watch, and I have been a victim of it as well, is theft. When you go to trade nights, for example, even taking your cards and showing to 4 different people at once. If you're laying them out on tables at trade nights, be very mindful of your cards. I guarantee you at the National, there are tons of people who are looking to steal your stuff. When it comes to your cases and how you have how you take your cards place to place, if they're in a backpack without a lock and it's easy for someone to unzip them in line at PSA and just grab your stuff, that can happen. Making the trip enjoyable is also setting up some fences, some protection, some walls, so you don't have to deal with something like theft.
Pet peeves of the National. Gosh, I don't really, other than someone not constantly just saying, I don't know what I want for the card or how much it's worth kind of thing. Nobody has an issue with, you coming up to a table and saying, how much do you think this card's worth? And we'll definitely tell you. There's no problem in that. But if you are trying to sell your cards, definitely have an idea of what you're looking for them. That's one of the things, the most important thing I would say.
My biggest pet peeve at the National is probably, what's the best you can do? I think that it's tough because, especially me working for a store, I don't necessarily know what we bought stuff for, so I'm not going to just openly go and say, oh, we can do blank, because I have no idea. If I hear an offer and I think it's fair, I just accept it. That's how I work. So I would say just go out and make an offer that you think is fair.
I have so many pet peeves about the National, and it's simply because I think people don't think about others. One big thing that I would encourage everybody to do, it is very expensive to set up at the National. I'm not going to go into the overhead. It's well over 5 figures. But when you are somebody who is cross-dealing, for example, like let's say someone's in line to sell to somebody and you try to start buying from that person, well, that dealer is going to get really upset because they know what you're doing. You're sharking all their area and the space that and the time that they've taken to create that buying section. Don't do that. Wait till maybe that dealer or whoever has taken a chance to look through that person's stuff. Another pet peeve of mine is when people are looking to lock in the dealer and catch the dealer, like trying to won over the dealer. This happens more than I like to admit it. I see it all the time, people bringing up raw cards that are damaged that sell, and so maybe there's this $500 raw card and it's got a dinged corner or scratched or a manufacturer defect they don't tell you about. Maybe in a trade, someone is negotiating down something and saying, hey, here's a $5,000 card. I'll give you $3,500 for it. No, I don't want $3,500. I'll do $4,200. All right, so we come to $4,000 as our agreement price, and then all of a sudden, well, I have some stuff to trade now. Well, I don't want to see that stuff that you have to trade. The card's it's $4,000 cash or $4,000, Venmo or whatever. It's not $2,000 and some other cards that I don't necessarily want. I always allude that to when you were a little kid and you watched your siblings who may be younger than you eat baby food, that your mom was force feeding them, right? That squash or that gross carrots or whatever in mush form. Like that's how I feel, like you're force feeding me something that I don't want, and I already gave you and I was fair with you on a negotiation. That sets me off a lot of the time. So don't do that. I think you'll see that a lot with dealers. They'll shut down if you do that. because it's playing this game where it's not really, I think, fair and reasonable. Another thing is, don't cross deal. Don't put your stuff on top of display cases or people's place of business and then do dealers. I've seen that happen so much, and it's so frustrating because it really does irk, I believe, the people on the other side of that. And the encounters that I've had to have with people, some of them have been very easy. And so if someone does say to you, hey man, would you mind moving your stuff? Hey, if someone's a little bit more direct and say, hey, get your stuff out of here, just smile and say, oh, sorry. Like that's a simple thing to do. I've had a lot of other guys with different retaliation, I'll say that, when I've asked them to move. But those are a couple of my pet peeves. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Picked up some tips and tricks on selling this year at the National in 2024, Cleveland, Ohio, IX Center. Make sure you guys give us a follow, subscribe to this channel. Meelypod is our new podcast as well, so we'd love for you to interact with all the awesome guests that we've had. A lot of cool nuggets dropped from our guests, and as Jeff and I get a chance to enjoy that podcast world. We will see you at the show. Come visit us. Our booth number is right here, and we can't wait to see you with your smiling faces, give you a hug, take a picture, and maybe do some deals. Andy from Indie Card Exchange is set up right next to us with his team. It's going to be an awesome, awesome event. We'll see you guys shortly.